This is a lovely Archtop guitar. It was hand built by a maker, I believe in Kelowna, BC, Canada, in about 1997. It is an Archtop classical guitar, so it has nylon strings. There's a 2-inch spacing at the nut, and the fingerboard is fairly flat. So it's a unique instrument. That needs a little bit of care. So over the 25 years or so that it's been in existence, unfortunately the spruce top has cracked in a couple places. There's one right here in the middle that was previously repaired. It's got a fair amount of stuff in it, but it's still a little bit separated in there. So it needs some attention. There's also this one on the lower bout and one on the upper bout. The upper bout one, the top is actually separated from the binding on the inside. You can see that here, perhaps in the picture. There's a bit of a separation there, and that's got to be glued. So it's going to need some glue in there. I use fish glue in what I'm doing for much of what I do. It's an incredible adhesive. It's strong. It's reversible. It can be cleaned up with water, which is absolutely fabulous. I've never had a problem with it. So that's what I'm going to use. So I'm going to put a little bit on a glue stick here that I can get in between and slide it in between thing. You can see how much lifted the crack is in this photo, because you can see that it's quite a bit separated from the side. So I went in there with this little glue applicator and got in. This took actually quite a bit longer than I show here. I did it several times to make sure that there was good glue penetration, and then clamped it up and had to leave it for 24 hours. And after that, I glued a cleat into the cracked using this piece of plastic to level things. So I got there's now going to be a cleat in there, and I'm still holding down that one side that is glued where the top is being glued. So I had to leave this for about 24 hours for everything to set up. So now I have the top is glued into place and a cleat. For the lower sound hole, it was a lot more difficult to get a cleat in there because I didn't have access through the preamp hole. So I set up this with super glue. I super glued the cleat to a piece of tape and then inserted it in there, got it in and glued. So now both of these places, or these cracks, have at least a cleat in them that's going to hold them together. I don't think it's going to take much more than that because of the fact that we're going to be inserting splines in there as well. So that's what has to happen next. So I got the cleat inserted and angled to the right angle for this crack, so that it's going about across the grain with a piece of spruce, and I'm using another piece to protect the top. So this was a little bit fussy to get the angle exactly right, so that when I inserted the clamp into the hole, it would be holding the cleat at the right angle, so that it was kind of going cross grain to provide support for that crack. This was probably one of the more difficult things that I had to do, is that I cut on a bandsaw some pieces of spruce that were 0.5/8 thick, and they were great, but they needed to be thinner. I needed it down to 0.18. So I tried a bunch of techniques to get this done, and in the end, to get them to fit, I basically had to hand plane them down with using very, very light strokes, taking off probably thousands of an inch of wood on many of the passes to get this down to thin enough that it would actually go in the crack. It was some time-consuming work, but it ended up that they did in fact fit, and that's the most important thing. So these are pieces of spruce that I'm testing the fit of to make sure that they're actually going to go in. This was compounded by the fact that of course, the archtop is curved, so it isn't a flat surface. It's fairly thick top. It was probably 3/16 of an inch thick, so I had to make sure that it actually fit into the crack and was going to arch in the same direction of the top itself. So I'm just going to fit this here and make sure everything is going to work. What I'm trying to do is try to get the curve of the inside surface to be about right, so that the spline is going to go in there and be shaped properly for the hole. So it's got to be done in like 3 dimensions to make it all fit, and it's got to be sized. So I've got to thin out certain spots where the crack is thinner, and this took quite a long time. I've edited this down so that you don't have to watch all of the time-consuming fit of this, but it did take quite a long time. I've edited out all of the off-camera shaping of this as I pull it out, reshape it with a knife, and then go back in, refit it, pull it out, reshape it with a... There was a small fragment of wood that was interfering, so I had to clean it out with my knife here before it would go back in and hopefully fit a little bit better, a little bit tighter. So a constant adjusting process, taking this thing to the right dimensions, the right angles, the right curves to get it to fit. I'm only worried about the sides and the bottom. The top I will deal with later after it's glued in. So I want to make sure it fits properly into the slot. So finally I'm ready to glue it, and I put my fish glue into the slot. It's properly fit, so it's time to get the glue in. I glued some glue into the slot itself, into the crack, and I'm also going to glue along each side of this spruce spline so that it has good glue penetration. I want to make sure that the glue is fairly thick, because I don't have to worry about too much glue on this because of the fact that it's fish glue, and I can clean it up with water. It's fabulous that way. The fish glue is a little bit sticky, so you've got to really push on these things to get them in before the fish glue gets a little too tacky, but it does have a very long open time. 15 minutes would be fine with this. So, if it doesn't fit, I can take it out. And there's a little bit of problems trying to get this thing in, but it eventually went in and was, going to work well. At this point, I want to put a little more clamping pressure, just a tiny amount, to make sure that that's closed and sealed. So I took one of my bar clamps with leather to protect the guitar itself and clamped it up just to provide a tiny bit of pressure on the crack itself, so that it would be closed to the extent that was reasonable to do so. So then I repeated the entire process for the lower bout and created a spline thread made of spruce, glued it, fit it properly, and then glued it in place, basically repeating the entire process that I did for the upper bout. And now they're both clamped and they have to sit for 24 hours to fully cure. So once they are cured, the next thing that I need to do is I've got to remove the excess. This is fairly stiff. The glue makes these pieces fairly stiff, so they're fairly easy to take away the excess material. I used a variety of different things here. I used my razor knife, I used razor blades, I used sanding blocks, tiny sanding blocks, to take this down to the surface. And one of the things that I did is I left the glue on so that it acted as some protection. Once I got closer to the top, it basically provided a barrier between the instrument I'm using and the top, and that helped to protect everything. So this razor blade has tape on each side, and I've also rounded over the sharp corners so that they won't dig into the finish. And then I use it to basically carefully take the spline down closer to the surface and try and remove some of the excess that way. I can get down to the level of the finish with this if you're careful and pay attention to what you're doing without doing any damage to the finish itself. This area where the top kind of recurves back is pretty fussy. It takes a bit of effort to get down low because it kind of drops into a little valley and then comes back up again. And dealing with it was a little bit fussy, not quite the same as dealing with a nice flat guitar, but I worked on it until I got it right. Once I got closer to the surface, I got out a new razor blade that was brand new and sharp to do the final close shaving of the spline down to the surface. This whole process took probably between 45 minutes and an hour. It's pretty fussy work, but you got to be careful because you don't want to damage the finish or do any other damage. Just trying to get that spline level. So once I got the spline close with using small Japanese chisels and the razor blade and the scalpel that I've been using, I had to go in to finish it off with very tiny little sandpaper. So I'm basically sanding on about an 1/8 inch wide sandpaper block that is using 220 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going down very close to the surface of the guitar. It'll actually look like I'm going pretty wide here, wider than the spline, but that's just the glue that is being sanded, and that's one of the reasons I left the glue on there, is to act as a bit of a protector. So I can sand down here to very close to the surface of the guitar without actually going into the finish. So with this sanded down, I now can wipe off the rest of the glue. So what I'm doing here is basically just washing off the tiny bit of glue that's close to the surface on either side of the spline. And you can see that the surface, the finish of the guitar on either side isn't damaged. It's just the glue that I'm removing. So you scrub this down and you can get basically rid of all of the glue that is there and leave only the spline. So the spline is raw wood, and what I do is I eventually go over it with a coating of shellac to seal it in, and then I go over with raw and burnt sienna alcohol markers. And now I've got to do the other spline, and it takes about as long, so I'll show you 45 minutes of removing the top of the spline, we won't do 45 minutes. We'll fast forward through this because it's basically the same process as was done for the one in the upper bout. This little Japanese chisel is both very narrow and very sharp. It works really well for removing the bulk of the spline that's sticking up above the surface.
When I took down the bridge, I found that there was 2 pieces of torn up veneer that was stuck underneath. I guess that they ran out of adjustment on these screws and started raising the bridge with chunks of veneer, not even glued on the bottom. So I gotta fix the, I'm gonna go underneath the saddle and put an additional piece of ebony there, so that it has a little more room to rise up and down, and on this side too as well, of course. So basically gonna fix that. Here's the little pieces of actual ebony. I think they'll probably be the only real ebony in this guitar. This is not ebony, it's just colored wood.
I think I was wrong about that. I think that the saddle was ebony and the fingerboard was too.
So this crack, this is too big, fit in the crack. The crack's about 23 thousandths, so I have to shave this down. Pretty sure this is the right grain direction. It'll tell me if it ain't.
So while the splines on the front were made of spruce, this one is made of maple, so it matches the back.
So this is block plane. It's a very good block plane. It's set to a very fine cut, so that I can basically thin this down. So way too thick. Might take just a scooch more. So wait. It's 54 thousandths. I need to be down around 23.
Because this crack was really curved and changed directions and angles, I had to do it in several different splines to make it fit. Same process here. You have to remove the excess using this little Japanese chisel, and then go down close with razor blade, and then sand it with a tiny little plane until I get it down to the surface of the back. This is about a 2-pound cut of shellac being applied. You can see it dries really fast. I'm just trying to protect the bare wood that was inserted in the spline, and then I don't have to color this one because it's maple and the back is a natural, so there's no coloring involved here.
So this crack is now glued and back down where it's supposed to be, and this crack is glued. There's a little bit of color around it. This crack is stabilized. It just has some glue in it. The bridge now fits and is oriented in the proper way, and there's some adjustment in the saddle with those little place below the those little pieces below the saddle will allow it to not have to be extended, so the shims could be removed. And the back of it has the cracks glued. This one was splined, and that one was just filled because it already had stuff in it that I couldn't remove. And overall, it's a pretty good looking guitar.
You can listen to me try to play a classical guitar with nylon strings and a different spacing than I'm used to.